Hi, everyone. We're here today to talk about why you need to visit colleges before applying. My name is Tosca, and I'm a coach with Success Coach.
And hi, my name is Tessa. I'm also a coach with Success Coach.
Okay, so we are here because we get the question a lot of, do I need to visit colleges? When should I visit colleges? How many? Which ones? Why? What am I looking for? All in all, when I look back at my college visit notebook, I visited, I want to say 29 schools. And it sounds cray-cray, but I think we did it in a pretty reasonable way and we started early. So I just have some thoughts, and then also I've spoken to my family, and we have some things that we wish we did, some things we recommend looking for, and we thought we'd pass that info on to you.
I think college visits are one of my big kind of I don't know, soapboxes that I'll get up on, just because they ended up being really important for me. They really changed actually the schools that I was planning on applying to, which schools I was most excited about. I think ultimately like where I ended up getting in. Also, I would say that the timing of my college visits ended up being very important. A lot of students think, oh, I'll just leave it to, the summer before senior year when I'm putting my applications together. I'll just take some stops. But honestly, most of our really competitive students who are rock stars rolling into senior year, they're busy that summer. So knowing yourself well enough to know, like, okay, is this something that I'm going to fit in then? Or is this something I want to start thinking about earlier? I think that that's a really important kind of thing to gauge. So I think that college visits are a lot of the kind of, fluff, what we often think of as fluff, that end up being really important to where you want to spend 4 years of your life and who you want to spend those 4 years with.
I'm biased because we started when I want to say I was a freshman. And it was casual when we were freshmen. I think what was useful, though, is it was just to give us a sense of what college is like. Something we did, which I'm very grateful for, is we did not start by hitting the fanciest schools. So we visited Eckerd College and the Florida Institute of Technology. I ended up actually liking both schools. I thought they were both really nice. At Florida Institute of Technology, they gave me the opportunity to sit down with the professor and actually talk to him one-on-one about what life would be like there. It actually is a chance for you to kind of start getting a standard. I will say I do think it's typical probably to visit as a junior. I want to say most people I knew in college at the very latest were maybe visiting during spring break as a junior. The culture at my school was to take it very seriously. I imagine it's the same for you, Tessa. However, better late than never. If you're a senior or a rising senior right now and you're like, shoot, I'm just going to Cabo for spring break. Guess I missed that train. Still go. You can go this summer potentially or blend it with a different trip. If you're not going to be able to visit a ton, try to be strategic and try to get some range in what you're visiting. So maybe range in size, city versus suburban versus rural, public or private or small, but you know what I mean? Just different student cultures. And then that way, at least when you hear some of those buzzwords, you'll know what they mean. Don't visit 3 identical schools if you're only going to visit 3. It doesn't need to be a big road trip like Tess and I are necessarily doing. Even just swinging by a school because you happen to be in town. And then if you're not a big traveler, you can do a virtual visit as well.
I also had some of these kind of little visits sprinkled in as an underclassman just to get a sense of what college was like what I would want to look for in a campus, so that when I did my big kind of road trip, that I had a list that was well researched and that I was going into with intention.
But you just get a different perspective on a school when you get to see what the buildings are like and where the students are hanging out.
Let's talk a little bit about demonstrated interest, because this is something that a lot of students just don't know about, especially so many of our students who are in California, just because a lot of the California schools don't track it.
Well, I think it just doesn't hurt to show a school that you're interested in them and you care and you've made an effort to get to know them. I mean, it's typical for them to do things like track whether you open their emails or click around on links. And are you active? And do you spend time on their website? Or have you reached out to professors? However, I do think that the benefits to you are huge. So even without demonstrated interest, it's still definitely worth it to go.
I will say that even for me, like, one, at the very kind of just like logistical level of like being able to show this school that I'm interested in them and being able to show this school that I'm serious about them, like going and visiting can be a great opportunity to have like something to say about that school when you go around to writing that essay. Like when you're coming around to writing that essay of like, why do you want to apply here? And you lead with like some quote from a tour guide that really connected with you or really gave you an insight to what the character of the student body is like. Like that's a big difference between like, oh, like I saw this page on your website. Beyond just like the very utilitarian, like, oh, I have something to write about now. Like it's helpful. Like it is very, very useful in getting a vibe check on a school. And I guess I'm very curious, Tosca, if you have any anecdotes like this, but there was at least in my process a school that I was really excited about. The campus looks really pretty from all of the images I've seen. Like they have Russian, like they have all the things I'm interested in. And I went and visited, and like perfectly good school. I know plenty of students who have liked it. Was not for me for a couple of different reasons. It just didn't quite click with me, even though I totally thought that it would, based on everything I'd seen online, based on every admissions email I had gotten. And ultimately, I didn't even end up applying there because I was just like, this is a way, like, I wouldn't want to go here, even though like I had a solid odd of getting it. And it was like that. I cite that anecdote all the time because I'm like, I would have wasted so many hours writing essays for this school that I was excited about. And then God forbid, maybe even showed up and enrolled there sight unseen, and it would have been a disaster because I was like, even just from a visit, I was like, nope, not my vibe.
The best case scenario is you feel strongly about a school when you visit it. Either you hate it or you love it. Starting with hate. It's amazing to get a strike a school off your list and be done with it. For example, I mentioned WashU earlier. It's an amazing school, undoubtedly. So I went on a random weekend, like I said, with my dad, and I understood after that visit that they have an amazing culture, but it wasn't the culture I was looking for in a college. It just didn't connect with me. I didn't feel like I was at home. I could see why I was amazing for someone else. And I'm so glad, because if I had been lucky enough to get in, it would have been an amazing option and I would have definitely thought about it, right? And then, when that time crunch happens, a lot of emotional energy would have gone into that school that I ultimately just didn't vibe with. Flip side, my sister fell in love with Wellesley the second they saw it. And from that day on, Chelsea was like, yep, it's there or nowhere. And ED.
Like that's a campus and a culture that you have to see to understand.
Yeah,
like you cannot get Wellesley. Like have like one of my best friends went there. No. You cannot get Wellesley from a website.
You can't. You just not. But it's the right place for some people. But Chaucer would never know that. Okay, here's the definitive guide on what needs to happen on this tour. A, you need a notebook. And that notebook needs to come with you to every tour. B, you need some sort of grading system. Think about what you're looking for in terms of academics. How do they rank with your major? What kind of resources do they have? What's the building like for your major? Do they have a core curriculum? Are you excited about that core curriculum? Are you frustrated that you have to take a billion requirements? Are you okay with it being cold? What are the students like, honestly? Do they look happy? How do they talk about resources available to students? Are there any other opportunities that are available? Some schools have really cool co-op programs where you're expected to go work for some part of the year and get professional experience. So you need to evaluate what's right for you. Like, think about it. We'll kind of evaluate that by visiting, but also with time, we'll be like, just would I like living here? You need to set your own standards based off of what you're looking for in college. And then be ready to rank that school. It can be a point system. I literally gave schools grades like they were in school. So I'd give it an A+ or an AA or an A-.
And I think a big caveat with all of this is like a lot of this, like, sure, you can find it on a website, but this is your opportunity to ask someone who actually goes there and get the inside scoop. Like, this is the difference between getting like the Google, ChatGPT, whatever answer and like straight from the source, like a student who has no incentive to sugarcoat things to you. I'm also going to show you something very dorky really quickly, Tosca, because I think it's so funny.
I'm so excited.
Like, oh, take notes, like give things a score.
Take photos. Please take photos.
I had this big
so real for this. This is awesome.
I know. So I had this big list of everywhere I was going, everywhere I was planning on visiting. We did this big route down the East Coast. But for every school, I had my little kind of note sheet going into the thing of, like things I knew ahead of time, things as simple as like, of majors that I could look up ahead of time and just know my basics. I also had a whole slide for just questions that I knew I would want to ask. Like these would get very technical often, like things that were not easy enough that I could flush them out just on the website. When I was visiting, I kept like pro, con, like just kind of other things that I wanted to be aware of. Like, oh, like the eating clubs are a super big part of Princeton I hadn't picked up on in like beforehand. And that was really emphasized in the visit. But this was my silliest slide that I had, is like 6 things that were really important to me. Like how much I would be paying for school every year, how good their Russian program was, you know, whether their student body seemed like a good fit, whether they had a strong international relations program, what their student paper looked like, because I was a total student journalist nerd, what their location was like. Princeton was kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I was like, I don't know about that. But like, I really clearly liked everything else about it.
Yeah.
Long story short, Princeton did not like me, but that's not the end of the world, because it worked out and Harvard seemed to. So, but anyway, but long story short, like this is something that I was doing. This was the big thing, because especially if you do college visits the way I did, where you knock a bunch out in quick succession, you have to be taking notes. You will not remember X anecdote at, you know, X school versus Y anecdote at Y school. You have to be taking notes. Like, and a couple of mine, I think I even have specific quotations from tour guides that I was like, oh, like that's an interesting insight into this school's culture, whatever, that I might refer back to, might quote an essay maybe, but like you have to be taking notes on these visits or you will not be able to distinguish between the anecdotes at one school versus another.
And also, this isn't just picking a line on your resume. You're picking where you're living for 4 years. You're picking a community you're entering for life. You're picking a set of opportunities in a way. If you think about the industry you might want to go to and into in the long term, proximity to that location might matter more, not just is it a good school. So a lot of students I work with talk about potentially wanting to go into medicine, for example. Is your school near a major hospital where you could do research as an undergrad? That might be relevant to you. Now, that's obviously so specific, and you can't really base your whole decision off of that, but it's just good to know. I would think 2 a day seems reasonable to me, 1 before lunch, 1 after.
I never did 2 formal visits in a day.
Yeah.
I always did 1 formal visit in the morning. Really take your time, be there, don't stress out about getting to the next thing. And then I had an informal visit, which is to say I wasn't part of like a registered tour group. I just showed up, walked around campus, saw the vibe. And those were usually the schools that I was less seriously considering, but I still went, I still saw what it was like. I found that was a little less stressful for me. And that allowed me to focus really fully on the school that I was, you know, visiting in the morning and kind of spend my, you know, really take my time. But everyone's a little different. But yeah, long story short, I definitely wouldn't recommend more than 2. I think there are people who think you can just like go to Boston and see like BC, Tufts, and Northeastern all in one day. And I'm like, don't do that.
That's not feasible. I mean, conceivably you could do as many as you want, but how much are you going to retain? How tired are you going to get? My ideal world, which I know is not possible for everyone, is just spread it out. Don't try to do it all at once, or try to make it fun. When I did a road trip with my dad over my junior year spring break and hit a bunch of the same schools you were hitting, Tessa, often we would mix it with visiting a friend or going to a show and turning it into an actual family vacation. So yes, they are annoying to coordinate. That's just part of it. It's more annoying to go to a school that you don't like. And I know that seems kind of cheeky to say, but maybe arranging it is a headache, but getting in and then realizing you don't like it is a bigger headache, in my opinion.
I would also note, in a related vein, one mistake that I see fairly often is that students will only visit their reach schools. Yeah. They're like, these are the 3 schools at the top of my list. They have like a 1% acceptance rate. Like, I'm only going to visit them. And then, you know, end of the day, like college admission is tough, regardless of how qualified you are or how hard you try. You might not get into some of your reaches or any of your reaches. And then you're stuck with, you know, a few solid targets, maybe even, you know, a couple of safeties. And you might realize that you don't know a ton about those schools or that you don't know what those vibes are. And I think that they seem unimportant when they're at the bottom of your list and they're pure hypotheticals. But when those are your only options, like that becomes a much bigger deal.
I mean, to frame that in a positive way as well, because that might sound scary to a student, like, these are your only options now. What you gonna do? The opposite might happen where you love a school. And I've seen this happen. I've just seen students say, you know, I didn't expect to, but I checked it out and I love this place. And yes, it's not the fanciest school. However, I am going to be so happy here. And all of a sudden, college admissions get a little bit less scary because you're like, wait, I could just go here and I'd be super happy. It takes, I think, some of the pain out of the process as well. Because you're like, wait, I have good options, and they don't all have to be an Ivy. Also, I mean, realistically, maybe getting that visit to a really fancy school and getting to hear what's not on the Instagram, if you know what I mean, and get some of the real perspective about what's hard, and why you shouldn't pick a school based off of brand name or online presence alone is so real. I mean, you have, if you really want to take things a step further, you can email admissions and be like, hey, I'm visiting. Do you have any students that you know of who are interested in XYZ or who are from my state or who blah, blah, blah? And they will often make an effort to connect you with someone. And you could try to get coffee with one of these students and ask them, like, hey, what's the deal? What's it actually like? And most students who have agreed to do that are interested in helping you find a school that you care about, and will be honest with you, saying, like, this is a good school, but here's what you need to know. Here's what's bad about it. Nowhere is perfect, and nowhere is as bad as you might make it feel in your mind. Yeah.
I personally love like the road trip model, but like there are other ways to do it. I'd say summer break is the big one where students make a lot of these. Winter break, I think, underappreciated. Like if you if you're traveling to see a family member, like knock out a college visit, like whatever. Or like if you're just at home in your home, like home city or home state, whatever, like making a college visit there. Only bummer with like winter or spring is the only other spring and winter breaks. I think you're maybe more likely to catch students on campus, but when you do things on breaks, it's a different vibe. But like travel to visit family. The other one that ended up being kind of helpful too was like my family does a lot of travel for sports. Or if you travel for like extracurriculars, like if you're, like traveling for, some like debate expo or whatever, and you happen to knock out a college visit, like that can be super helpful. And it's just an easier way to maybe get some of them done a little bit more gradually. The only other thing I was going to flag that I did not know about as a student who was applying to colleges, and I really wish I would have, just because I think I would have been eligible for some of these things, is that some schools also have fly-in programs. This is a big thing too for like, if you're one of those rising seniors, some of those programs will be only like they're tailored towards you as someone who's kind of in the final stretch of the application process.
Definitely make the most of it, and also work with your counselor and be like, hey, this is here's some of the schools I want to hit. Yeah. How do you think I should do that?
A couple of notes too on the fly-in programs are that one, like when it says fly-in, it means that the school will oftentimes pay for your flight out to visit them, and you get to stay with a student usually. Like you sleep over with some like sophomore at whatever college in their dorm. So it's also that extra layer of like you're really seeing how the sausage is made. Sure. Like you're getting that inside scoop that you do not get from an admissions website. A couple of the things that I had on here were, there are always webinars online. You get to ask some of those questions at least. You might get exposure to a student or two. They'll usually mark it down for demonstrated interest in the same way that they would a tour. So if you're worried about that, that kind of checks some boxes. I also have YouTube on here, as like oftentimes you'll have a lot of like interviews with students or like day in the life kind of thing. One extra venue that I'm a little cautious of, but I think students sometimes get something out of, is that it's not uncommon that you'll have students actually making content about their lives at a given school. I think you have to treat this kind of thing with a grain of salt, because sometimes it's a very particular, like curated version of what life at that school is like. But sometimes it can be helpful.
I say go full investigative journalist, no holds barred, go crazy. So some of the things that were coming to mind while you were just talking is, yes, YouTube 100%. Please keep in mind that the person who wants to make content about their school has an incentive to make the school look amazing. So, do with that information what you will. Some other ways you could explore college. Get on Google Maps and see what's in the area. Does it look fun? If you wouldn't visit it for a weekend, would you want to live there? Again, talk to admissions. They will often try to put you in touch with someone. See if anyone from your school has gone and try to get in touch with them, and email them like, hey, would you hop on a Zoom with me for 20 minutes? I'm just so curious about what your experience was like. Even if they can't get on a call with you, they will often answer your questions and try to give you helpful information. You could always cold email people. I've gotten LinkedIn messages about college and also about jobs in the past, and I've tried to help out where I could. Or Instagram DMs are not too weird as long as you're being respectful, which Hopefully you are. Read their paper.
That's what I was gonna say.
Go check out their school newspaper, see what's going on campus. What are people talking about? What are the controversies going on? Because no school is scandal free. Something's happening, right? How are they dealing with it? Is that how you'd want your school to deal with it? What do the administrators have to say? Because some of the hard hitting journalism, like, it's the kind of the job of the school newspaper to talk about what's going on campus. So yeah, I'm glad we're on the same wavelength there. Other vibe checks you might get would be just looking at outcomes. Like, who are some recent grads? What are they saying on panels? Who are they bragging about and why? Because schools have every incentive to brag about positive outcomes for students. So, see where there seems to be that strong connection. I'm trying to think, like, how else can you go stalker mode? Because you really can.
One other stalker mode tip. Department specific, like
Yes.
social media pages or blogs or like
Yes.
or websites. The general kind of admissions page, or general university website, it's just basically going to tell you how green their grass is. Looking into the LinkedIn page of whatever specific, like, the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies, like I would have known a lot more of the tea if I'd been following the very specific kind of department or subject specific pages. I think to this end, like, student groups can be interesting too, of like, what's the vibe of, like, I don't know, this like a cappella group that is on campus. Like, are they like kind of cool? Are they, like, is their vibe kind of cringy from their social media? Like, I don't know, like that can be like a good litmus test of, like,
Totally.
the things that I want to do on campus, like, are the people that I would be doing them with, on my same wavelength.
That's the deal. Because you don't go to the whole school. You go to your department and you go to your clubs. And even like trying to reach out to that department as well might be an easier way to talk to a student, not just admissions. You will be surprised by how much professors and students want to talk to you and how interested they are in you, as long as you don't seem like a schemer weirdo. If you are genuinely interested and want to hear about their experiences and learn from them, and you're not going into it with expectations of they're going to write you a rec letter when you're done with this Zoom, you'll be surprised and you'll learn a lot. And also just having that genuine interest in people is a good asset to have for anything. So we love a little rant.
I think we yap so much, though, because this is, I think, one of the more exciting topics that I think some students just don't really have on the radar. They're just like, I'm going to write my essays. I'm going to check U.S. News and World Report or whatever it is to see what colleges sound fancy, and I'm just going to apply there, sight unseen. And that is just a bad way to go about life planning. So yeah, no, college visits are a big deal. There's a reason we talk about them so often.
Slay. Okay, well, I have the actual final advice is talk to your counselor, make a plan. We can
talk to your counselor. Make a plan. Talk to your parents. Make a plan. College visits are not something that you can do on your own, generally speaking, as a 17-year-old. So it has to be a bit of a family effort.
But like, in all seriousness, if you don't want to visit there for a day or a weekend, why would you want to go?
Live here for 4 years.
No, like, it should be somewhere you're excited enough about. So you're like, oh, this is a cool place. I want to check it out. I think it'd be fun, regardless of whether I go to the school.